Ambassador Gordon Sondland is discovering the hard way that lying for Donald Trump is not as easy as Donald Trump makes it look. Here is Congressman Peter Welch on this program 3 weeks ago when we first discovered the contradictions between Ambassador Taylor's testimony and Gordon Sondland's testimony.
Is Gordon Sondland in danger of perjury charges for his testimony to your committee?
Well, I think he is.
He keeps it simple. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Peter Welch from Vermont. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee and the Oversight Committee. He took part in today's hearing. And Neil Katyal is with us, former acting U.S. Solicitor General and an MSNBC legal contributor. And Congressman Welch, let's start with the new discoveries today about Gordon Sondland and that cell phone call. What does it add to what could be a perjury case against Gordon Sondland?
Well, it's a first-hand account that he conveniently left over, and he's already had one do-over. But you have this person who's going to be deposed on Friday who heard the phone call between President Trump and Ambassador Sondland. And President Trump, very explicitly, according to the witness today, was concerned about the investigations, not about the Ukraine policy, not about repulsing Russia, not about getting rid of corruption. It was about the investigations he wanted done on Biden. So it's going to be a very powerful day on Friday when we have an opportunity to depose this witness.
And Neil Katyal, legally, I think there are people out there who think that it's not perjury if you say, I do not recall. That kind of automatically avoids perjury. And it's not perjury if you just don't mention something. You just leave it out. If you don't talk about it, then that's not perjury. How does this work? How do you see this situation for Gordon Sondland right now?
I think it's looking really, really bad. Obviously, it can't be the case. The rule can't be you can say, I don't recall, and get out of perjury charges, because then everyone would say that to every question, and we would never have perjury, which is one of the essential tools to keep truth in our justice system going every day. And here you've got a separate problem, which is this new devastating testimony today by Ambassador Taylor concerns a conversation that Gordon Sondland had with the President of the United States. Now, I've worked in 2 different administrations for 2 different presidents. I can guarantee you, Lawrence, I pretty much remember word for word almost every conversation I've had with a president, even if I had many of them, because the gravity of such a thing. You're talking to the President of the United States. And here, he went and testified and didn't mention this at all. He's already, as the congressman said, had to come back once, and now he's going to have to come back again. And boy, if I'm advising him, I think this guy's in real trouble. Perjury has a 5-year statute of limitations, and I know that the Trump administration has gotten used to a fake attorney general who doesn't look at and investigate when there's wrongdoing by members of the executive branch. But this is a 5-year statute of limitations, and I tell you, Lawrence, any attorney general, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat, will look at this and be deeply, deeply concerned. I worked for 2 different attorneys general, Eric Holder and Janet Reno, and boy, they would look into this, and they would look into it even if the president told them not to. That's what Holder did, for example, with the CIA investigation into abuse. When the president didn't want him to look into it, he still did. And that's going to happen here. So Sondland has to come forward next week and say either he lied before or he forgot, whatever euphemism he wants to use, or Ambassador Taylor's lying. And good luck with that.
Congressman Welch, I want to take a look once again at this moment that you had with Jim Jordan, because Jim Jordan has been getting away with his stunts in hearings for as long as people have been watching him in his hearings without the suit coat on. And so we've shown it once already, but with you here, I want to show it once again. Let's just take a look at this.
There is one witness that they won't bring in front of us. They won't bring in front of the American people. And that's the guy who started it all, the whistleblower.
I say to my colleague, I'd be glad to have the person who started it all come in and testify. President Trump is welcome to take a seat right there.
Congressman Welch, well played, to put it mildly, but Jim Jordan is the big star that the Republicans had to make room for in that committee. They had to kick off a member, bring him in so he could sit there and have moments like that, which you completely crushed today. Jim Jordan had nothing to say back to that moment. And of course, obviously, it's Donald Trump who started all of this.
Well, that's right. I mean, Jordan is a performer, and what he does is incredible bluster. He speaks so fast I get a headache, and I can't quite keep up with it. But when you peel it back, what's he saying? And usually it's nothing related to the central question of whether the president abused his authority to get advantage in a political campaign. And he is attacking the whistleblower in threatening his identity, even though everything the whistleblower said has been corroborated. And bottom line, Jim, if you want to get the truth, why don't we bring in the president? That's sort of the self-evident fact, and I call the question on that.
Neil Katyal, I want to go back to the point you're making about the statute of limitations, because also, if you look at Donald Trump's polling numbers, it looks pretty bad, his reelection prospects. And I keep wondering about people like Gordon Sondland. You know, don't they realize that there's a very strong possibility of there being a Democratic attorney general in not so long down the road, and that these cases are all live cases going into the next administration, possible criminal cases. So if Gordon Sondland's going to be making phone calls to Donald Trump, he might want to be talking about pardon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you're Gordon Sondland right now, you have a lot to worry about. And by the way, Lawrence, I think that's true even if it's another Republican attorney general who comes in. I think any fair-minded attorney general will look at this and say, oh, really? You forgot a conversation you had with the president of the United States in a restaurant? I mean, come on, give me a break. And this is why I think, and this is what you're talking about with Congressman Welch, the Trump defenses have essentially collapsed. I mean, the defense today that Jim Jordan was running was, well, this is all hearsay and third hand. You don't have any first-hand witnesses to what the president thought. And I think the congressman's exactly right. The real devastating problem with that is the Democrats say, look, we want all of those people in. We want Trump to come in. We want Bolton to come in. We want all these witnesses. We want documents and emails. And what are you doing, Mr. President? You've issued an order that says no executive branch employee can come in and testify to Congress and tell the truth. You've said no documents will be turned over. That is not the way a president of the United States behaves. That's the way King George III behaved 200 years ago and what we fought the revolution about.
Neil Katyal, thank you for joining us tonight with your invaluable legal insight on this. And Congressman Peter Welch, thank you for joining us tonight. Very important for us to have you here tonight on this night where I know for a fact that you are a hero among both Democrats and many Republicans in the House of Representatives for crushing the Jim Jordan Act today. It's not just Democrats who know how silly that man is.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.